So I'm going to keep my, my intro to like 5 minutes because I know you're anxious to see the movie. So around the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, director Stanley Kubrick became alarmed over the prospect of nuclear war. He began writing Dr. Strangelove as a serious film, but as he worked on the screenplay, he kept coming up against laughable plot points, so he opted for a dark comedy. In Dr. Strangelove, the most illogical idea becomes a reality, a nuclear doomsday machine. If the Soviets are attacked, their doomsday machine will destroy the world. It's meant as a deterrent. Who would attack if there was no way of surviving? But what if a crazed American general, modeled after real-life war-loving Curtis LeMay, the Pentagon's Air Force Chief of Staff in the early 60s, doesn't know about the doomsday machine? Meet Brigadier General Jack D. Ripper, played by Sterling Hayden, whose long cigar points upward and never leaves his mouth. Need I state the obvious? The opening sequence shows nuclear bombers refueling somewhere in the clouds. As the fuel is injected from one plane into another, it's like watching planes have sex. Someone once said, all things men make are sexual. After U.S. President Melvin Muffley, played by Peter Sellers, learns that Ripper has sent bombers to Russia, top defense leaders meet in the war room. When Ronald Reagan became president, he wanted to see the war room. There is none. President Muffley learns that the bombers cannot be turned around because the only person with the code needed to recall them is the general. This was the real top-secret fail-safe system in place in the early 60s. In the fictitious war room, President Muffley gets on the hotline at 3 a.m. with a drunk Russian President Kissoff to tell him American planes are on their way and can't be recalled. Hello, Dmitri? He asked tentatively. Peter Sellers plays 3 roles. Besides the president, he is British flying officer Lionel Mandrake, who becomes Ripper's prisoner after he tries to stop him. This provides us with a confidant's access to Ripper's insane logic for the attack, which Ripper tells Mandrake, the Soviets are fiddling with our water supply through fluoridation. We learn this while Ripper defends the U.S. air base he commands against our own soldiers who are trying to stop him. Sellers' third role is Dr. Strangelove, an ex-Nazi advisor to President Muffley, inspired by Werner von Braun, a German rocket scientist recruited by the U.S. for its space program after World War II. In a deliciously crazed German accent, Dr. Strangelove gets increasingly excited over the prospect of a community of survivors living at the bottom of a mine shaft. Perhaps Mein Führer will get to see his perfect race after all. George C. Scott, who plays the sex-obsessed chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Buck Turgidson, is all for the survivor community, since the ratio of women to men would be 10-to-1 and monogamy would go bye-bye. The American Film Institute rated this film the #3 comedy of all time after Some Like It Hot and Tootsie, and the 26th most important movie ever made. Slim Pickens, a Texas cowboy who became a movie star, plays Major King Kong, the leader of the bomber squad on its way to Russia, and how he deals with the problem of stuck bomber doors in the movie's final moments is something you'll never forget. Dr. Strangelove came out in 1964 and is 95 minutes. Enjoy it. Thank you. So I just want to talk like for a very few minutes and then I want to open it up to discussion, okay? So Stanley Kubrick read over 40 books to write the screenplay for Dr. Strangelove. The inside of the B-52 bomber was incredibly accurate to the point where Kubrick feared investigation by the FBI and made sure all research was done legitimately. The plot for Dr. Strangelove came from a novel, Red Alert, by Peter George and a popular 1960 nonfiction book by military strategist Herman Kahn called On Thermonuclear War, in which he argued a nuclear war was winnable and proposed a doomsday device. Maybe Ronald Reagan didn't know there was no war room, but during his tenure as president, he worked with Mikhail Gorbachev to bring about a partial reduction of nuclear weapons by both sides. Dr. Strangelove was scheduled for release on November 22nd, 1963, the day of the JFK assassination. It was released instead in January. When Slim Pickens goes over the contents of the survival kit, he originally says that chocolate stockings and prophylactics would make for a great time in Dallas. That was changed to Vegas. Kubrick made 13 feature films that are considered by other filmmakers as some of the top films ever made. They are 2001, A Space Odyssey, Eyes Wide Shut, The Shining, A Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon, Lolita, and Paths of Glory. Kubrick was a family man who lived 40 years in England because he didn't like Hollywood deal-making and wanted rustic peacefulness. Paths of Glory was banned in France for 20 years. Lolita was banned by the church for 6 months. Kubrick thought human beings were desperately flawed. Now, here's what some people said about the movie, and then I want to know what you think. Bosley Crowther, writing in the Times, didn't like the contempt for the military establishment, calling the movie a sick joke. He later changed his mind. Pauline Kael didn't like that it offered no solutions. Susan Sontag called it negative. Daniel Ellsberg called it a documentary. Most critics and the public loved it. What do you think? Yeah.
I thought it was definitely pretty funny, and it kind of accurate in the sense that nobody really knew what was going to happen on the other side. You know, the whole containment theory, in the sense that we had to contain communism from spreading, sort of played like a psychological impact on it, that everybody was fearing what the other side was going to do. And in that fear, something like this could have easily happened by one little miscommunication or, step of authority. So I kind of think, I kind of agree with it. It's kind of a little scary to think that like everything can happen like that so fast and, by a human error. But the whole sense that it didn't really offer an alternative, and it was kind of like a really bad representation of the clusteredness that our military has, it kind of can go both sides.
Has anything changed?
I don't know. Probably not.
Do any of you worry about a madman with his finger on the bomb?
Yeah.
I do. If you want a rundown on like current military defense related to this, you should see Eric Schlosser's 25th anniversary of Dr. Strangelove article in last year's New Yorker. He says exactly how defense works today. So what's your favorite moment in the movie?
I liked well, I didn't like it, but I thought it was funny that at the military base, there are all those signs that say peace is our profession, and then they're all like shooting at each other and, gearing up for war and whatever else. I just thought it was, that they're the place that, wanted that ordered the nuclear bombs and whatever. I thought that was.
Yeah. Well, the whole notion of defense has some logic to it, like to have peace, you need to go to war. I like lines like, you can't fight in here, this is the war room. Or Muffley talking to Kissoff. Let me finish, Dimitri. Well, listen, how do you think I feel about it? Can you imagine how I feel about it, Dimitri? Or Turgidson saying, Mr. President, I'm not saying we wouldn't get our hair mussed, but I do say no more than 10 to 20 million killed tops, depending on the breaks. It's hysterical. Yes.
I like the final scene where it's Dr. Strangelove and he's fighting himself. It's like such a weird thing of like the one hand fighting the other hand. It made me think about how in the movie our enemy is ourselves.
Yes.
It's like Dr. Strangelove embodies like everything that's happening in the United States. Like the enemy is not some external threat. The enemy is our own system or our own patterns of thought or behavior.
Absolutely. That's a really good interpretation of that. You know, Peter Sellers improvised a great deal, even his speeches. And there's his name too, Dr. Strangelove. And anybody want to say what their take is on that?
I think it's kind of like proven throughout the movie when you see the U.S. Army fighting the U.S. Army at a military base, and then the president fighting, well, he didn't really get in contact with the general. It's kind of like who's calling the shots, who's fighting who, and we're all sort of like corner against each other on who's stronger rather than uniting. So I think that's a really good interpretation. I mean, I think it's justified throughout the film too.
I mean, I assume there's a love of mankind somewhere, but we have a strange way of showing it. I think that's where Strangelove comes in. Let me tell you a little bit about Stanley Kubrick, the director. No, I think I said what I wanted to say, yeah. Why hasn't it happened? If this specter is so near, you know, if it's so easy, do you ever wonder why we're still here? What has kept a madman from, you know, obliterating life on Earth? I mean, I think it's I'm extraordinarily grateful to be here. Do you have any questions about the movie? Because if you're seeing it for the first time, I've seen it maybe half a dozen times. There may be parts of it that were confusing. Were there?
How did you guys think it compared to the other Kubrick films you've seen?
Oh, yes.
I love his filmmaking. The Shining is probably one of my top favorite films. So I kind of like the eerie music in the background always, because that's sort of something that's definitely happened in The Clockwork Orange too. And then the different shots that he takes and perspectives, especially where you got to see the scene where the general's smoking a cigar and you had the shot looking up, and you really got to see the complete madness in his face. It sort of showed the control of the madman. So I think Kubrick is a genius.
Genius. Yeah. Clockwork Orange, really disturbing.
Yeah, my mother hates that I like that film because that generation, when it came out, it was a very disturbing film. But I think it raises some interesting points in it as well.
You know, the reaction to that film in England was so bad that Kubrick used his unheard of directorial power to pull the film from circulation. No director has ever done that.
I guess I could see where he would do that though.
People got very, very upset over that.
Wasn't his family getting death threats?
Oh, yeah.
That was part of the reasoning, right?
I want to talk a little bit about the music in this movie, because Kubrick is known for making movie music more important than it had ever been before. So we have Try a Little Tenderness playing when the planes are refueling in the movie's opening scene. Then we have Johnny Comes Marching Home playing throughout the movie. And then Slim Pickens' famous Ride Atop the Bomb takes place with Vera Lynn singing the tender ballad We'll Meet Again in the background. The song is a 1939 British song famous during World War II and written with soldiers in mind who hopefully would be returning to loved ones after the war. Did the music work for you? Yeah.
one of the more interesting music choices I thought was like the repetition of like that marching song.
Comes marching home.
Yeah, during with the plane, because I thought that was such like an ironic thing of using like this patriotic song as they're going off to do this, and also like the Slim Pickens himself is like this weird like criticism of like the American cowboy myth, kind of like marching into Russia to just start the obliteration of mankind. So I thought like the music kind of encapsulated what was going on there quite well.
The names were wonderful, right? Buck
I
Turgidson.
think it's interesting that he picked these kind of love songs, because now you got me thinking, like, why is it Dr. Strangelove? And then he has these love songs, and then I had forgotten, because I hadn't seen this in, I don't know, over 10 years, the sexual references until your introduction, and so now I'm thinking about that as well. Like, what's going on with love and sex in this?
Sexual politics.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I should mention that on YouTube, free, is an over 2-hour documentary called Stanley Kubrick, A Life in Pictures. And I just keep on watching it over and over again. It's an amazing biography. Stanley Kubrick, A Life in Pictures. I haven't seen Barry Lyndon, but I thought I would see that. And see 2001 again. Woody Allen said about 2001 that the first time he didn't like it. That was my reaction. Second time he thought it was a good film. Third time he thought it was terrific. Most filmmakers have a very high opinion of Stanley Kubrick, who died in 1999, right after the release of Eyes Wide Shut, which I didn't like. Anybody see that? No, it's very strange. The Shining, you said you liked The Shining.
Yeah.
Tell me why you like The Shining, because first of all, I don't like horror, and secondly, I'm afraid to watch that movie. It's terrifyingly.
It is. I like the shots are great. Like the still shots, they just zoom in, and I'm a big Jack Nicholson fan, and the character development in it is what I kind of really liked. Especially with the dialogue with him and Lloyd at the bar. I think that's like one of the biggest scenes in film history, because it's, you know, that's again where you see a madman just completely lose it talking to Mr. Lloyd, who again, I just love that dialogue in that. So yeah, I think that he touches on like human elements that many other directors don't touch on.
Yes.
And a lot of it has to do with madness and how that we all kind of have this little madness inside of us, and it just takes a little bit for it
Yes.
to explode.
Right, heavy on the psychology, yes.
Also, The Shining, I feel like, is really good at walking the line between like realist and surrealist.
Yeah.
Like, because the movie opens with, we're getting this story about this guy with writer's block who also has a history of drinking, and he's trying to become a better family man. Like, it has like the plot of like a really realistic like familial drama, and then it just like takes the turn for the surreal and like the psychotic, like halfway through, or I guess a little less than halfway through. But I just like find it interesting that like it has all like it has all like the markings of just like a familial drama, and then it turns into what it turns into.
What do you think about in this, which it had all the markings, like it could have been a tragedy, but he turns it from a tragedy into a comedy? He's really good at like walking that line where you're not quite sure, like, what kind of film am I watching here? Did you guys find it to be a comedy?
I kind of found it to be a comedy because tragedy can be a comedy in a sense that like our human elements mess us up so much that we end up just creating this tragedy in something that we didn't even mean to do in the first place. Like it was one little mistake that ended up making like this huge catastrophe, and it's like that's something that one human can do, like, you know, Jack Nicholson can, you know, or whatever his character is in The Shining, he can, you know, be one person that didn't have much of an effect and then completely change the whole dynamic through that human element.
I think also just by reducing like everybody in this movie down to just like base and childlike, it just like creates like this absurdity where like obviously what's at stake is and also like just the high, idea of like what's at stake in these 90 minutes is like literally the entire world is gonna die is like just such an absurd notion. Like that juxtaposed against him having a childlike conversation on the phone with the president of Russia who's drunk at a party, it seems like it's just funny. Even though it's like terrible, it's just like funny.
I think he makes a point there, though, with those base childlike emotions, that they're the underpinning for a lot of defense notions and, you know, like, I don't know, the problem with the world, right? Childlike feelings that come up and steer, you know, international policy. Anybody see Lolita? Don't miss that.
Oh, we'll have to show that sometime.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It's like my favorite movie. It's phenomenal filmmaking.
Another great Peter Sellers role
Wow.
too.
He's got at least 3 roles in that
Yeah.
as well. And James Mason, if you like. Other comments or questions? Nothing else confused you about the movie? Favorite moments? Peter Sellers, who'd you like? Do you like Peter Sellers' performances? It was an amazing guy, right? Comic genius. You see that in Lolita, I think. I mean, that's my favorite role of his. Georgie Scott was terrific. Slim Pickens. That was Wyman Keene, who played the guy with the Coke machine. And, oh, did you notice James Earl Jones on the plane? Very young Jones.
I recognize the voice, but I didn't know from where.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you then.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank